Hello, and welcome to the third edition of Auto Insider, a podcast from Automobility Limited. I'm Bill Russo, founder and CEO of Automobility, a strategy and investment advisory firm based in Shanghai. And since 2017, we've been helping companies navigate the disruptive shifts transforming the mobility landscape, spanning electrification, connectivity, autonomy, and new business models. And with China at the epicenter of these changes, we're in a unique position to bring you insights from the front lines of innovation. Auto Insider is a platform for conversations with the people shaping the future of mobility, especially in the markets where transformative technologies are being scaled at high speed. And today on Auto Insider, we're joined by Zhen Wu, president of Magna China. Zhen is fully responsible for the strategic planning and operational execution of Magna's business in China, overseeing all business units and driving cross-product line collaboration. Zhen joined Magna in 2010 as vice president of legal affairs for Asia, and over the past decade, she's played a key role in shaping Magna's China footprint with a leadership style that blends global perspective and local execution. Prior to joining Magna, she worked at Bird & Bird in Germany and at General Electric China Company Limited. Welcome to Auto Insider, Zhen Wu. Zhen, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast. Let's start with your own story. What brought you to the automotive industry, and what's kept you inspired over the years?
Bill, first of all, I have to thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very delighted to spend the time and talk to you, have the conversation. As you said, I joined Magna in 2010. It's Magna brought me into the automotive industry. It has been 15 years. It's a fantastic journey to me and also to Magna in China. What kept me inspired over the years? I think it's the whole dynamic of the automotive industry, particularly starting from 2009, when China became the biggest single market in terms of production. And then over the past of 15, 16 years, the dynamic of the growth, the power, excitement of the whole migration of the industry, particularly in the past of 5 years, all those changes, challenges, I think that kept me and my team very excited.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting pace of transformation that we've witnessed. I've been here 21 years, and it was a order of magnitude smaller a market, and one that was, I think, dominated by multinational companies. Since you've joined Magna in 2010 and became the president of the Magna China in 2023, could you tell a little bit of the backstory of Magna's journey in China, and what do you see as some of the next challenges for your leadership of the organization?
Yes, I think as I mentioned earlier, Magna journey in China is actually a very classic example of most multinationals. And we came to China to support global OEMs for their global expansion. We are part of the global platform, and we work with the head office in North America and Europe to make sure we can consistently deliver the quality parts, even in China. So we started to invest directly into the Great Shanghai area. We set up some greenfield facilities. And then we also have a few JVs partner with state-owned companies or private owners. So this is why in my first 10 years with Magna, I work very closely with all the Magna groups and also corporate teams like finance and other functions to make sure we timely set up our footprint for the Magna groups to serve our customer. On the other hand, we also identify the merger acquisition targets and then to work together to make sure we close the deal on time. And as I said, the first 10 years, we are pretty much focused on global OEMs and how to support them, like the Germans and North Americans. At the same time, we also think about how should we grow with the Chinese customers, which actually gave us a very good momentum. Because I remember in the around 2016 or 2017, we already put China growth potential as one of the KPIs for global merger acquisition. So now we look back, a few deals we did at that time, and with the major consideration say, hey, can we grow China in a meaningful way with the global acquisition? it worked out. It worked very well. We have seen the results in the past few years. That was really kind of a strategic driven to say, hey, we came to China with global OEM, but how can we grow with Chinese OEMs?
Right. The market's changed so much, but I think one thing that is critical is you need to establish the beachhead and build it up to be relevant for not just present day, but for where the industry ultimately is going, and being able to anticipate those changes because they do happen so quickly. We kind of themed our talk today around competing at China's speed. China is a market that has transformed in such a fundamental way. It was, I think, initially defined by suppliers who came to supply to access a growing supply chain of manufacturing companies to collaborate with to source. Then it became a big market to sell into because the rise of the Chinese economy and the middle class population demand for mobility. Now it was dominated in those early days by the multinational companies who brought many of their supply chain relationships, including your OEM relationships initially through joint ventures that were established in China. But what you're describing is your journey was helping to architect those businesses, helping to put together the investments and setting up the foundation for what business that you currently do in China today. So I think that the challenge to the multinational companies is how do I not let my legacy but be my albatross, not let my legacy be the reason why I can't move in a different direction when the need presents itself. So I think looking at the journey till now and now looking forward from your point of view, what are the defining characteristics of the China auto market today? And how have they maybe changed over time that you've been involved at Magna?
Nowadays, definitely, I think are quite different from the time I joined Magna. Now we look at the Chinese automotive industry. First is, I think, the scale. We have to remember, I think in 2009, for the passenger vehicle, the production volume reached only 10 million. But last year is 27 million. It's almost a combination of North American and European market together. So the scale of the industry, that's, I think, the first defining characteristic of this industry. And the second one is the advancement of NEV market and technologies. I think, Bill, you said a lot most of the time that like every 5 vehicle, 1 of 5 vehicle is actually from China, and also the NEV percentage is very high. So we have seen very strong NEV players, Chinese OEMs and startups, and also technology-wise, I think the NEV-related technologies are highly implemented in Chinese market already. So the second factor, I think, is a high penetration rate of NEV vehicles and also advancement technology for this type of vehicle. And third is the overcapacity, which we already observe. I think that leads to a few further developments. The first one is the tough competition on product price level and on innovation, because everybody wants to provide different vehicles. That drives a lot of innovation, the different unique features they wanted to put into the vehicle so that they can attract more consumers, which is understandable. And then, of course, the tough competition within domestic market push for higher exporting business. So we have seen in the past few years, the exporting volume has increased significantly.
Yeah, it's been a breathtaking pace. As you said, China became the world's largest car market in the world in 2009. At the onset of the global financial crisis, has continued to expand, now double the size of what it was then to what it is now. But it isn't a market that is currently growing, with the exception of 2 growth vectors: new energy vehicles, NEVs, and exports, which now represent 1 out of every 5 of the cars made in China are actually leaving the country. So if you're not wired into that trend, and I think that becomes the challenge for the multinationals, is most of the multinationals did not come here to build cars for other markets. They came here to build cars to sell to Chinese customers and keeping up with that transition, both of those transitions, the buildup of the domestic capacity for overseas and the pivot to NEV have been the real challenge for the multinationals. They did not anticipate those changes. But as I look at Magna's performance in China, you've pivoted toward local OEMs who are today dominating the market. They have, in the first 5 months of this year, local brands in the passenger vehicle category are selling 69% of the passenger vehicles were sold by local companies. Magna today has about 60% of its China revenue coming from local OEMs. That was 2024 numbers. What drove that shift? And what lessons have you learned in the process of making that pivot?
I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think what drove the shift, it was actually defined back to 2016 or 17 when we do all those global major acquisitions. We're already saying, can this target company to support our business further grow in China? So I give you example, like one, we did a major acquisition to acquire German-based powertrain company, which actually brought the strong DCT product portfolio into our business. And then after 2 years, actually, we deeply integrate that business into China region and then work very closely with the local OEMs and try to explore the business opportunities. And it turned out, I think, with Chinese vehicle going outside, we do enjoy very significant business growth. But of course, thanks to our customer, they work very hard and they develop the new market, and then they enjoy their volume increase. And as a part of the core supplier, we also enjoy the benefits. So I think it defined it by their strategic decision Magna as a company made back even 10 years ago. And then, of course, the partnership with the right customer, which also really make the whole plan in reality. And that's really driving the whole growth. And we also have another interesting experience is like one of our business groups was relatively late to the Chinese market. So when they try to look around to develop their business, and all major global EMs already have local partners for that particular category. So we really have to think about, be innovative to say, if we want to survive in the Chinese market, if we want to continue to grow, what we can do. And the team made a very good decision, and they choose to partner with the Chinese OEMs. And then they also form partnership with the local Chinese company. And that also drives significant business growth. So I think, again, the majority are driven by the business decision of the team here and together with global team. And secondly, we have to partner with the right JV partners and the customer. That will really make sure you have the result at the end.
Right. Well, these are valuable insights when you think about a few things that I think typically do not come together very well is having a headquarters, anticipating technology shifts and investing in them. That has to happen years in advance of forming these partnerships, because having value to the local players requires that the companies who are foreign have a relevant value proposition to offer as these companies make the transition to new energy vehicles. So investing in technologies that make you continue to be relevant to the global auto industry, not just to China, but to every manufacturing company that you partner with, and working closely between the China team and headquarters. Too often, there's a separation. Having worked for a multinational OEM, Chrysler, it was always difficult to get the China point of view to be shared with the global team. I think that's another challenge I think multinational companies typically face is you're often asking for things to be done at a different clock speed in China than are typically the way the global auto industry has worked. It's sometimes out of sync with where the headquarters wants to be versus where China wants to be. And then the third part that you talked about, which is having these deep relationships with Chinese companies and offering not just valuable technology, but you also, as a global contract manufacturing partner, as a global manufacturing partner, you provide a global footprint that is very valuable to Chinese brands as they seek partners who can help them, not just in China, but outside of China. That's often not the reason why foreign companies come to China. They can come to China to do business with the companies outside because they weren't outside until recently in large numbers. Now they are. So I think Magna has a unique blend of capabilities to offer to the Chinese brands as they think of themselves as increasingly global companies. You've worked outside of China. You've worked in Germany. Your company is North American based. It's a Canadian headquartered company. So obviously you've had the opportunity to work outside of China and inside of China. How would you compare working with Chinese OEMs versus your traditional Western partners?
Indeed, a very different experience. I think the whole process experience working with a Chinese OEM is constantly test your limits as an organization. So they expect a fast lead time to launch products. They constantly asking for the cost optimization, and they make technology changes from time to time, even had the design frozen already. And I think the whole dynamic on the Chinese OEM side is much more challenging for us to manage as an organization. We feel much more comfortable to work with Western OEMs based on the well-established process and rules. That's kind of reality, right? In the entire automotive industry, people have well-established working process protocols. People know what they need to do by when and for what. But I think what happened in China with the Chinese OEM is the whole working process is challenging. So that is actually a major difference working with Chinese OEM and Western OEM. But what I'm saying is for the past, even recent years, like starting from last year and particularly this year, we have seen there significant change on the Western OEM side as well. They also come, try to say, hey, what's going on the Chinese market? Can we do more? Can we do faster? So right now, I think the gap between the two different type of customers are getting closer. The trend is our protocol and precedence has been constant test for
Right.
under the China. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation that things, either Western companies speeding up or Chinese companies, I don't know if Chinese companies are slowing down because they're faced with such fierce competition. As you pointed out, I mean, it's a market that's grown, doubled in size, but hasn't really been growing other than NEV and exports. But the capacity, as you also point out, overcapacity that exists in China puts a lot of pressure on Chinese companies to stay ahead in the race. Otherwise, they face consolidation. And I think that's really a motivating force that exists more so for the Chinese companies than for the Western companies. I think the Western companies were a bit slower, well, significantly slower. They wouldn't have lost as much market share. Chinese brands have almost 69%, as I said earlier, of the domestic passenger vehicle market and virtual dominance of the new energy vehicle category. So with Chinese companies and as a supplier working with Chinese companies, do you see a change at all in the way they're acting both as competitors, or are they this pace of movement, fast moving, fierce competition? How do they survive and find a way forward in this market? And how do you, as Magna, as a supplier, separate the winners from the losers? How do you thrive as a supplier? Because you don't want to invest your time necessarily in picking the wrong partners. How do you think through that challenge?
We have been discussing internally for this question for years because the first question I think for automotive industry is the volume, right? The whole business model is depending on the volume. And I think nowadays probably it's the whole competition landscape became a little bit clear compared to 5 years or 3 years ago. We have seen the rise of new entrants, and then we also have seen the whole leading OEMs try to make a change. So now to us to look at the whole market dynamic, we really try to understand who are the leaders on the market and who has the capability to really bring the products the consumers like to have. I think it's a major shift of the business model. Because in the past, we always focus on the vehicle itself to say This is a perfect designed engine. All the technical specs are really at a high level, and we try to point out this is a perfect car, right, for the customer. But now I think it's more shift to what the car can do for you as a consumer. So I think the whole value chain has been expanded enormous, starting from the target consumers, what the consumers, who are your target consumers, and what vehicle you need to design, develop to fulfill that group of people's requirements. And then you push down to the supply chain to say, hey, can we get it faster and at a good quality, at an affordable price level, so that I'm able to really solidify my market share with this type of consumers. So I think for Magna, no doubt, we have to really keep close monitor on the market, particularly on the sales market data, to observe each models and the selling volume month by month and customer by customer to understand what really happened. And hopefully from understanding those data to see, hey, what's the whole strategy execution on the customer side? Are they on the right track? And what we can do to help them be successful, and so that we can all better off as a part as a supply and OEM customer. I think for we focus on to keep close communication with our OEM customers, and we want to make sure we are able to catch up their pace in terms of product launch, in terms of product design. And then hopefully we can also utilize our technical skills and also industry knowledge to feedback them, to give them proposal on what product and what technology is actually good for them, so that they have a better, stronger competition position on the consumer market. This is what we actually are focusing on, working in a really ecosystem, have a strong partnership with our customer in China.
Right. I think one takeaway from what I've heard you say, first of all, the being a B2B supplier and accepting as a given that the intel on the trends in the market is sound. I think you always have to challenge based on understanding of the market and what is setting, what are the likely drivers for success in the market. Being successful today, I think for a supplier was always thinking upstream. How do I do the integration job? How do I do the manufacturing high quality and at efficient cost? How do I deliver a good value proposition in a B2B relationship? It isn't just that anymore. As this market gets more fiercely competitive, as the technology acceleration happens, you have to challenge more. Are the companies that we're partnering with the companies that are in sync with where the market is going? Are we picking the right partners? Are B2B relationships the right ones? And that's something that I think over the course of the 100-year history of this industry, suppliers have not had to concern themselves with that. It was about acquiring a B2B customer, and each one was equal. Not anymore, especially in China. That the highest quality customers of 2000 to 2010 may not be the highest quality customers for 2025 to 2035. In fact, it might be the opposite that's true. And the other thing you pointed was building the ecosystem of relevant technology integration for where the market is going. That makes you valuable. And when I say where the market is going, it's not just the technologies that you can provide in your B2B relationship based on your knowledge of the B2C trends, the way the market is trending, having the deep tech integration skills in the areas which are highly relevant for the competitiveness of the OEM clients. That becomes increasingly the challenge for the traditional supply chain. But the other thing that I think is very important to keep in mind as we build that out is these companies increasingly want to expand beyond China. Typically, we haven't purposed our business with the focus on that, but I must think that that's got to be a significant selling point to a company that already has a global footprint. You're already established everywhere in the world. The Chinese companies are not. So that's got to be a capability set that could be of significant value to your clients, I would assume, if they're local companies. Is that what you've found in your business?
Yes, we actually have been actively discussing with a few China-based OEMs on their global expansion plans. This, I think, as you pointed out earlier, the Chinese OEM, when they go global, they definitely look at what local partners or what those companies, they have a global capability, they can work together and to save the cost, to guarantee the quality, and then to make sure they have timely launch of the product in that particular market. And another thing I think is most of Chinese OEM, when they do their global strategy plan, they also emphasize to use local resources to make sure we do not have duplicate the investment, to make sure they have utilized local resources. That is also the good news for most of international companies. They have already footprint in other countries like Europe or Middle East or Southeast of Asia. Yeah,
Yeah,
we have seen that.
they want to tap into your global resources and knowledge of how to set up successful operations in those markets. I was going to ask you how Magna has localized its operations, talent, and decision making to match the pace of China. But I want to maybe broaden that. How has Magna built a successful way to present itself as a global resource to those very same Chinese companies? Because I would assume that you're supporting them not just with your pool of talent here, but you also have a global pool of talent that also provides support for your Chinese clients as well.
Yes, this is a new area. We are already put some thoughts and took some actions to address the how to support Chinese OEM go global to utilize our internal resources in other regions. And at the very beginning, it's more kind of, spontaneous based on the project. And we got to inquire from one customer versus another, and then we try to work on. And later on, we realized this is actually part of the strategy for most of the leading Chinese OEMs. And then we have to think about how to work internally in a systematic approach to utilize our resources in other regions to support the Chinese OEM. And we set up a team, an internal team with the lead in China. And the leader in China, they keep close communication with all the major OEMs. They already have concrete plan to go global. And then we consolidate the information, and then we link the information to our resources. For instance, if that's a European related program and we were engage the local resources in Europe, but internally we work out with distribution information, we discuss and we make a proposal jointly, and then we present to the Chinese OEM to make sure we can use the local language and communicate in a precise way and make it effective communication with our customers. And when we reach to the stage where we really have to do local work, and then we will make sure the local team can catch up the whole page and with the whole information or counseling from the Chinese team based in Shanghai, and make sure the process will work, will take off. But on the other hand, the China team will also be part of the working team and observe the communication. I think it's more to make sure the whole integration process between the Chinese OEM and our brother or sister divisions in other countries, and make sure that goes well. And the China team will become a major part, make sure everything goes smoothly.
Great. Yeah, I'd say there's really two key challenges there. One is how do I efficiently and effectively help Chinese brands stay ahead in the race, especially the EV race? And then how do I think about their efforts to expand internationally, and how can we support that? Because that's really where they're going to find the growth. The race in China is to make sure you survive, because it's a very, very challenging market. Certainly not a growth market. If there's any growth at all, it's coming from the gasoline powered vehicle share that's being shifted over to the EV. The growth is going to be outside. I would take that as sort of two key challenges. It's very clear Chinese brands are ahead in the EV race. Could you share a success story or a challenge that you encountered when pivoting to support the local EV makers?
For the domestic market, you're right, Bill. The competition is intensive. We have observed constantly pressure on cost and the speed in terms of innovative technology. So this is actually the two focus areas for Magna. We look at what product we need to provide to the customers so that we can make their life a little bit easier. And we basically put into two categories. The first one is indeed, can we bring any brand new breakthrough or high-tech features to the customers, which will be enjoyed by the end users? So that is the first category in terms of innovative products. We actually ask all our groups to think about what would be their innovative product you're already in production, or you plan to develop, or you think you need to have in order to be competitive on the Chinese market. Because this is number one talking points whenever you talk, you have a meeting with the Chinese OEMs. They always want to ask you, oh, what new technology you have in your pocket, and show me, and let's just work together. And the second category is, as the traditional players, as you understand, Bill, Magna have very diversified traditional components, and which give us capability or potential to think about, can we modularize? Can we standardize? Can we make it platform-based products so that we can make sure, the whole, to integrate some of the products, make sure the OEMs, their production process will become easier, less expensive, and more efficient. So this is the second category. We look very deeply inside to say, hey, can we disrupt? Can we innovate our traditional products to make sure it provide the value, business value, the better cost control to our customers? And with that, I think we wanted to really support our selected customers in China so that they are able to survive in the tough competition within the on the domestic market. But on the other hand, for going global, I think most of Chinese OEM, they have their challenge in front of us is how to build up their brand image in other markets. And some of the companies think about the brand up, which means they try to make their brand more luxury image than they used to have. And that's something I think as a Magna, we have complete vehicle engineering. We also work very closely with other consulting companies in other regions. We can give quite a lot of feedback and suggestions to the Chinese OEMs when they try to define their vehicles for European market or other country markets. So to give advice to the OEM on what type of vehicle, what kind of a technical spec they should have for the particular market. And secondly, I think we can also work together with local partners to help the Chinese OEMs to build up the good distribution channel. We actually work with a few potential customers, and right now to think, help them. Should they go online distribution or they will go in the dealership? That's a question for most of OEM. They are not decided yet. In between, can the front end, what product you define, and at the end, how to you distribute to the customer. In between are actually Magna's expertise. We have the engineering service, we have a complete vehicle manufacturing, we have a components groups. So for that, I think naturally gives us the good position to say, hey, what we can support to the customer is actually a little bit more than just a Tier-1.
More than what an upstream supplier would be able to offer. Having that infrastructure already in place as Chinese companies expand, they're going to experiment, and they have with B2C. They're going to find that it's an expensive proposition to try to build all that infrastructure on their own, and they'll increasingly look for hybrid models. They don't want to give up the direct channel if they don't have to, but they'd like to keep the intimacy in building up direct relationships. They're trying to establish brands which are unknown to the world. They want to learn their own way about how to build that direct relationship, and I think are offering a value proposition rooted in technology that is different from what the multinationals have been able to achieve so far. Retaining that while tapping into the benefit of legacy. I think what I learned from what you've shared is don't assume your legacy doesn't matter. It does matter. You have a technology, a capacity, an experience base, and some of the technology fields that are less important for the future, you still rely on the ability to scale in order to get the efficiency from the supply chain. And the legacy does matter. And I think that's too often given up in eras of transition, right? We race to the other side of the boat. And I think both, there's going to be it's going to be a hybrid world for quite some time, both on the technology side, on the supply chain side, and on the distribution side, as you pointed out, which I wasn't thinking as clearly about, but obviously that's very important to companies as they don't have a beachhead. They don't have an established business overseas. And so as more and more, and this is really the theme of the day, as China goes global, what is the role of multinational companies? We tend to see it as a threat from a traditional automotive industry point of view, but actually it might be, as you point out, it might be an opportunity. As more Chinese OEMs look abroad, how do you see the role of a global tier-1 supplier evolving from obviously your starting point, a local partner in China, to a globally integrated strategic collaborator?
Yeah, that's, I think, the trend we have seen, particularly in the past of 2 years. I think that definitely gave a very clear message to the traditional multinational companies to think about what value they can bring to not only to the global OEM coming to China, but to the Chinese OEM going global. I think we have gone through the process, and now I think for Magna, we look at really very positive way with all the Chinese OEM. They go global. First of all, in the very beginning, they probably still need strong support within China. They shape the components to do CKD, SKD, and then try to test the market and make sure they understand the local consumers' preference so that they're able to launch successful vehicles on the market. They need the strong suppliers to provide quality components to meet all different kind of regulation requirements in different markets. That, I think the multinational companies can definitely help in this very beginning from China. And then once they understand more about the market, they know what vehicle model they need to launch for the local markets. I think the whole process requires the global footprint, the technical or regulatory knowledge in multiple countries, and require a flexibility of the resources. You're able to pool resources in a very short time period from one country to another. And I think that's the unique position for most of multinational companies they have right now, because they're global based. They have footprint in over 20 countries, right? They have enough resources in different markets. That's the advantage for the multinational company to really think about if they decided to join the game to serve the Chinese OEM in their global expansion plan.
It certainly would be the area where there's growth potential. As we've witnessed Chinese companies rising to now more than this year, likely more than 6 million made in China vehicles going global, factories being built around the world. There's going to be more and more presence of Chinese brands outside of China. And it certainly is the growth opportunity. The challenge, I think, to the multinationals is we're not configured for that. We didn't start the business with that in mind. Sounds like within Magna, you've kind of made that a value proposition, your global footprint. The challenge is, though, how do you synchronize the local team with the global team? How do we make sure that it's one team, not internal conflict over whose client it is? How do you manage that within Magna?
This is a very challenging process, Bill. I have to be honest. That requires open-minded mentality. People are willing to accept new things because this is a disruptor of well-established protocol, right? I explained our business starting from global expansion of the Western OEMs, and we're used to follow the global process and rules to make sure the local execution will be perfect. But with the Chinese OEM going global, that requires a lot of effective communication skills to make sure what will happen in China, we can effectively communicate back to the global team. That is not an easy process for most of the international companies and between the China team and the global team. I have to say that. But I think Magna, because we have the complete vehicle engineering and production business unit, so really brought us deeply into the whole Chinese OEM go global and the whole strategic importance to serve Chinese OEM is much, much higher than if we were just a components group, because the word probably come a little bit later. Magna have been exposed at very early stage. So we already studied the kind of communication process years ago. And we have gone through a lot of sessions and try to net our teams and colleagues in North America and Europe to understand what's happening. So timely communication and complete data reporting, and then provide a complete picture. That requires very strong communication skill and other analytic skill sets for the local team.
Absolutely. And especially now with the industry going through this transition, listening to the trends and the innovations emanating from the world's biggest market, super scaled now in a new technology set of domains in batteries, electronics, manufacturing, and integration of hardware and software. I mean, think of manufacturing companies need to set their pace at the speed of the fast horse. And right now that's emanating from China. And I think global auto industry needs to keep up with that pace if it wants to stay in the game. So let's look to the future and the strategic evolution of the industry. How do you see the technology roadmap evolving? We've witnessed the rapid scaling of electric vehicles, and now we're moving into this intelligent driving domain. How do you see the technology roadmap unfolding in China?
China right now, I think in terms of the whole technology transformation is a little bit ahead other regions, is because China have a very mature base of internet business. Because the whole mobility, the internet service companies were established, mature, and the consumers have already been trained well and have a high acceptance of the new technologies and also a connectivity type of service. So that really, I think, drives the whole technology migration of automotive industry. And we have seen the high penetration rate of EV, but that's not the destination. That's just the process to give the whole automotive industry a better technology solution for connectivity and smart EV. I think everybody talking about in the future, vehicle will be the biggest mobility device on road. So that's the trend I do believe. I think we need to understand what's the business impact. How should we do with that? I have really observed what's happening in China and also with the recent AI implementations, ChatGPT and DeepSeek and all different kind of resources. I think that will definitely disrupt the whole industry and to push the technology implementation and then to change the business model and eventually require all the players from OEM to Tier-1, Tier-X to change the operating models as well to make sure we can drive the efficiency and we can really leverage existing technology well to make sure we can design, develop the vehicle which can give the consumers and what they really need for that biggest device on road. And then that drives all the technology development of the different components. And of course, they will be led by the e-architecture. Make sure there is a smart, centralized system which can command the whole components and make sure the vehicle is a smart device which eventually gave the best benefits to consumer. With that in mind, I think for us as a Tier-1 or the supply base, we have to understand it's easy for us to really look at what's going on on the innovation, on the intensive competition on the innovation investment. And everybody tried to really beat their competition and bring the newest technology and make sure they are ahead of the game and they can provide their really so-called smart vehicles on the market. Because with AI, with connectivity, we have to consider the network, the network effect. So once you have the good technology, which can attract enough consumers, that will become a platform, a network. There were more users are willing to join, and the whole scale of economy is different. So this is why the speed, the time to market is so important nowadays compared to the past. And then I think the whole AI will make the process even more significant for the company can utilize the AI tool, and they will definitely boost their process in terms of how fast they are able to develop that perfect product for the consumer, and then eventually become their product for most of consumers. I think that's the kind of the race for most of the OEMs. They try to say, hey, do not dare to be left over, and then they want to be ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Well, Zhen, you've outlined very clear and articulated very well the challenges that we're faced with going forward with the technology shifts that are likely in front of us. But if you don't build that foundation around the new electric vehicle architecture, you're going to be at a loss for how to incorporate all these high tech. If you didn't design your car to be a computer, a smart device on wheels, then it's going to be hard to really keep pace with the software domains that are likely to occur around intelligent connectivity and AI, in-cabin HMI and self-driving technology. These are hardware, software integration challenges that lie in front of us. And I think the winner in the race is ultimately not going to be necessarily who makes the cheapest EV, but who makes the most sophisticated computer at an affordable price. And in order to do that at a reasonably affordable price, and in order to do that, partnerships, ecosystems need to be built. And Magna's DNA is to be an integrator. Originally a hardware integrator, now a solutions integrator at the vehicle level, at the vehicle and deep tech level. I think that really defines the frontier that you're hoping to play in. I'm going to ask one last question. What advice, and our audience of people in the industry, but also people who are hoping to attract people to be part of this revolution going forward and understand what's emanating from China, because we do think it's the frontier for innovation and scaling of the next generation of automotive technology. What advice would you offer to the next generation of industry leaders who are navigating this very fast-changing landscape?
This will be a very exciting journey, Bill. I think the whole automotive development in China and also in other regions with AI, with the digitalization, I think that will make the whole journey much, much more attractive and exciting. In terms of suggestion, that requires the future leader have sufficient technology knowledge to understand the big trend, and then economic and social impact of the technology change. That's fundamental. You have to have the big picture in mind to understand the change, because we are still in the industry transformation. We will anticipate a lot of different things, new things. And the second point, I think, because I said, it's already becoming kind of B2C or service industry, it requires a basic empathy or even compassion as a human being. You need to understand as a consumer what's the needs and what they need, what they prefer, what they dislike. And so that you are able to think about what technology you need to design or develop to serve their needs. And the last one, I think, is leadership. Because we are in the middle of transformation, again, that requires a lot of confidence or ability to take risks, to try different things, and have the confidence to accept not the satisfactory results and then try again. And a strong leadership can really utilize the resources around us well, and then try to define a new north in this transformation time period. So I emphasize a lot within Magna. I said, try to push up the leadership skill to really have the bond ability to take responsibility, take a risk, make a change. And that's the core expertise for an organization to really try to challenge themselves and then find a new way to go through this transformation process.
Thank you so much, Jen. Very, very well summarized and very, I think, very refreshing view of what I think is going to be a very exciting industry to be a part of. And I think we have to stop thinking about the auto industry as emerging from the Rust Belt. It is a high-tech industry and one that we have to embrace as sort of the bellwether of the future. I remember sitting in a presentation given by Jensen Huang from NVIDIA when he described the AI development in the automotive industry is the most exciting technology challenge in the world's most important industry. We're at the beginning of that wave, the whole AI revolution and what it means for this industry across the value chain, not just about teaching a car to drive itself, but reimagining the whole manufacturing system that surrounds the production of the mobility device. Thanks so much. That brings us to the end of this edition of Auto Insider. A big thank you to Zhen Wu for her sharing her invaluable insights on how global suppliers can compete and win in the dynamic market of China and in the global auto industry. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and gained a deeper understanding of the forces reshaping the automotive world. And I'm going to look right here and say, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to get notified of future episodes and to help other people discover Auto Insider. Until next time, I'm Bill Russo. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Bill.